Hi, I'm Shannon Grissom. Are you looking to ignite your creativity? Or how about be inspired by a steady stream of muses? Welcome to Painterly Life, the podcast that celebrates those who create, inspire, and innovate. So, whether you're looking to spark your next big idea, reignite your passion, or simply soak in some creative energy, this is the place for you. Painterly Life, where every guest is a new muse just for you. Welcome to Painterly Life. I'm your host, Shannon Grissom. Today we have a phenomenal artist, Laura Schwarz-Smith. She's an author. She's done multimedia, multidimensional art, and just an incredible human being. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You have won tons of awards and you're always so humble. Were you always an artist as a child? What was your childhood like?
Well, I was incredibly lucky that I had parents that were so supportive of my art efforts. I actually had an older brother, and he was very gifted in art, and I just idolized him. And very sadly, he was hit by a car. He died when he was 14, and I was 10. So to me, art was this incredibly strong connection to my loved brother that we lost. And I think maybe my parents just really loved that I was working in art as well. He was very, very gifted. So I was so lucky that way, having, a lot of early encouragement. That was so fortunate.
Art is so healing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you went on to graduate from San Francisco State University with a degree in fine art. Painting was your emphasis. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, it was a San Francisco State. It was during the years Bob Bechtel was there. He was my advisor, and it was a really good art department at the state university level, and I was really grateful for that. And I'd had a wonderful community college experience first up in Santa Rosa. They had a fabulous art department for a junior college, we called it then, back in the dark ages. And so I felt very, very lucky to have great art experience. The kind of funny thing is, though, even though I adore drawing, life drawing, and drawing and painting, but I kind of got a wild hair because I was still playing with fabric a lot. I was making terrible, terrible bed quilts, baby quilts, bed quilts with my mom, my quilt buddy. And so somehow for my final senior painting project in college at State, I did my first wall piece. And that was my final deal. It was a textile art piece, very odd now that we think of the quilt world, but that's what got me into the textile arts, which was to follow for many years. That final painting, I put it in a little show in Sausalito Gallery, and it sold. And I went on to play with textiles for many years.
Well, you really blew it out of the water with your textiles. I mean, you had incredible success. Weren't you named one of the top 100 quilts in the United States?
Yeah, that it was back in the, oh yikes, 95. It was 1995. And I had joined a local group of quilters and discovered, oh my gosh, they have their own. I've been selling in galleries. I continued with these kind of odd, I called them bas relief. They were lightly stuffed. They were really different. But I sold, Kenny Loggins bought two of my pieces out of the Santa Barbara gallery, where I eventually, I think 85, maybe had a solo show there. So I was totally unaware of the emerging quilt world, which is actually a very huge deal. But I had no idea of it growing and becoming a big deal. I was just on my little merry way, doing my little thing. And then when I joined the local gang, then I learned about this big support system of the quilt world. And so I noticed they have competitions and jump in the deep end. There was one that was Quilt a Modern Fairy Tale, and it was one of these biennial ones they do off in Europe. And so I entered my first one. I got a second place, and they made it into a cookie tin in Denmark. And then the next one rolled around, and anyway, I think that's how I got the Degas quilt I did, and it went on to be named one of the 100 best American quilts of the 20th century. This is not something you enter. It was just, it was voted in by a big group of people. So that was amazing. And that set me off on my teaching career as well for art quilting, So I did that for a long time.
You wrote a book about your quilting techniques?
Well, Kirby and I later. I am married to a great guy, also an artist. He's a pro photographer and now mixed media artist as well, which his work usually incorporates some sort of photography because that's his strong point. And so he is the tech guy of the team. And he began to be interested in printing on fabric, and I played with that. And then he kind of joined in, and we did. We ended up producing a book with the big quilting publishing group called C&T Quilting. And so that was way back when. And so we both taught at really big I taught a lot, and he taught as well at like a Silomar, the big 5-day conferences, and so it was a great ride. It was. For me, it was like 40 years in the quilt world. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and your quilts are beautiful. So now you're painting, and how did you make that shift, or what prompted that shift from textile as a medium to paint?
Right. Well, I'd always envisioned myself finally, I'm going to paint one day, but I got so busy teaching and producing time sweeps along, and we came to a really hard year. I was totally overbooked, and health things happened, and I had a commitment and an unexpected commission, which was a huge deal from Children's Hospital to do a huge textile piece. And I meet my deadlines, so I met them. But at the end of that year, and we had two shows at the Kirby and I together had two solo shows at the two California quilt museums, Visions down in San Diego and up in San Jose. But at the end of that year, I was totally burnt out. I was not happy with the quality of what I was able to do for the second museum show. And I just said, I am taking a break. I never knew that it was going to turn out to be kind of the end of that life, because it was such a piece of my life. I was really deeply into that world and loved it. But I had started drawing and painting with our local wonderful group, the Yosemite Sierra Artists. They were at that time still known as the Yosemite Western Artists, but upcoming, I think we're going to have our maybe 54th anniversary art show. It's a long-standing, wonderful group, and I knew a lot of people that attended our portrait sessions, and I started going to those toward the end of my quilt life, and I realized I love this, and I love drawing again. I always marked and drew on fabric. That was kind of my deal, but it's different. And then I started painting, and I realized that this is what I want to do. And looking back on it, I realized, I've fallen out of love with the process. And I do think that we can all kind of take a second and think about how important the creative process is. That is where the magic lies. We love our end products. We can hang them on a wall. We can hide them under the bed. We can do whatever happens to them. But I think if we think about it, that absolutely magic feeling when you're going to start your creative process, whatever it may be, and I think it can be in the kitchen, it can be in the garden, it can be at an easel or on the stage. But the deal is that it's that process, and if that process loses the magic for you, then I think it's time to look for another process. So I did, and there it was waiting for me. I love pushing paint around, and I realized I'm going to put my time into this. It happened kind of gradually. I kept thinking, well, maybe I'll do another art quilt, and no, I'm going to do another painting, and.
Well, it looks like it's just been a fun ride. I notice that a common thread through all of your paintings is a huge, great, epic sense of movement. And then it dawned on me that you and your husband Kirby had built this amazing labyrinth on your property, which is itself a great work of art. And so I was wondering, do you have some sort of tie-in? Do you use that as a contemplative place? Does that influence your work? Tell me about the labyrinth and how that works with your work.
Yes. It is a magic thing to me. We built it, I think, only about 5 years ago. So I have done some labyrinth paintings. I have a couple. And I we do tend to walk it most nights, sunset, because it's kind of a little 360 view. It's not huge, but we built it. Oh, Kirby, he carried up over 1,000 pounds of river rock up a steep trail and backpack by backpack, because I weighed them. I said, don't carry so much. And I would slap it down. We already had this wonderful 6-foot post rock in the center, Kansas post rock. You can look that up. It's a fascinating deal from the 1800s. And so we had that up on the knoll. And so I've always wanted a labyrinth. And so I found a pattern I figured I could fit in about a 30-foot wide knoll there. And we laid that. So yes, walking that every evening, and I find that very, very important, very renewing. I do think there's something about a labyrinth. And I helped lay one up at Yosemite Gateway Art Center. It's very small because we had a finite amount of space, but it is there. And so anyone visiting the Yosemite Gateway Art Center in Oakhurst can walk our little labyrinth up there.
What a great blessing for them to have. So, did the labyrinth influence Nightfall or Hunter's Moon or any of your moon paintings, or are they just all interwoven?
I think so. I mean, I do try and pull from the inner life in my work. And I love that you talk about the motion, because I think there is something magic to me about feeling like that there's movement, and that there's, when I'm fracturing work, which I sometimes work more realistically, and sometimes I do what I think of as lightly abstracted or fractured, in that I want to explore the planes of a surface, like on a face or in a landscape. And figures and animals. I break up the surfaces. I try to use extended lines, somewhat echoing lines, and pushing the surfaces around, and just exploring the way that light and shadow form onto forms. And it's playful to me, and it's fun, and it's more challenging and yet more rewarding to me in a way than working realistically. So yeah, maybe the labyrinth and the circling and a walking labyrinth isn't a maze. There's one way in and one way out. And you just be in the moment, step by step by step. And that's kind of, I guess, the way I like to try and feel when I'm painting, in the process. I'm not a planner. I don't plan out ahead. What I'm actually going to end up with. I may have a sketch and usually stray wildly off that if I do. I kind of like to explore it on the surface as I go to a certain extent. I often, in the middle of when it's hard, how you hit those points like, now what? I think, planners are so smart. People who plan it out and they know where they're going. But I like the hunt of it, the chase of it, on the surface. So on the animals, yeah, I really love the wildlife that we have in our area here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we're a day trip into Yosemite Park. What a wonderful place to live. And that's very influential, I would say, to probably all of us living in this area that are in the creative life. How important and how fortunate we are to have this beauty and this wildlife. Um, there are bobcats, mountain lions, fox, bear. We had a lot of bear scat and a big old bear track right across our property recently. And so you never know what you might see. And I like to celebrate that in my paintings.
I think celebrate is such a great word. Besides the movement in your work, there's a lot of sense of play, and especially in your animals. They're very joyful, and it's just great to see. So when I noticed, speaking of that, with I think it was Raven's Dance, had Yosemite in the background, so I definitely saw some influence there. Well, you talk about the creative process, and I don't know about you, but I've had some years where it's kind of like the old Dyer's Straits song, but maybe not to this degree. Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. But I've had ups and downs in my art career, and I guess if it was a graph, it'd be, I don't know, it's always going up, but there are some dips. And so if it does happen to you, how do you address the low points? How do you address the challenges that being an artist brings?
That is a very excellent thing, because I think, gosh, I've been thinking about this lately, because as it happens, I had a down year in certain ways this past year as far as sales go. And I consider myself a pro. I've been at this game a very long time. No matter what medium you're in, you carry things forward. All that I did as in the art quilt life, it really counts on what I'm doing now. It's my toolbox. Everything I've done is in my toolbox. But so some years, we know when we've been in it a while, there are definitely the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs. And I think that I've been thinking a lot about this as exterior validation. And it occurred to me, it feels like this kind of dangerous, sweet narcotic, you get a lot of, accolades. And I've been very fortunate in my art career in that I have had, sometimes without seeking, just hitting at the right moment and hitting at a lucky time, and the judges, whoever happened to be in, I have had fortune. And then maybe there's years where things aren't so sweet. And I really love thinking about it like this. It's like, ooh, it's so lovely to have all this frosting on the cake of people buying your work and getting awards and getting into the shows that you go for. And then there are periods where, ooh, that wasn't my year maybe. But it's a valuable thing in that, let's think about, like, and I'm talking to the pot here, the pot and the kettle here, that why do I paint? Why did I leave this very successful career? I had a big career in the art quilt world back in the day. And it ended for me because I lost the love of doing it. And again, it reminds me, why do I paint? Do I need other people to tell me that they love it and they want to buy it? It's sure nice. If that doesn't happen, though, I am having this opportunity to think, I am painting because I love the process, and there is the creative power, and that I am going to paint what I want to paint. At this stage in my life, certainly time is my most precious commodity, time and energy. And I'm going to use that to do what is important to me, to speak with my art. And I think it's a really great, kind of like, wake up, who are you painting for? And if I'm not selling this year, then I'm not selling, but am I making what I feel good about? And so I think it's a great opportunity when things maybe don't roll the best, that you, 'cause we all are going to have these ups and downs, and to just get stronger in your own space and say, this is what I want to paint. And this is what I want to create. This is important to me. And hopefully I will find the right person, walk through and say, ooh, gotta have it, and maybe I'll get into this show. I've got stuff out getting into shows, maybe, or maybe not. You get juried into shows, that's a validation. And so we're always riding along that rail, I think. But it's a good opportunity, I believe, to reassess and get stronger about why you are doing your creative life, and just own the power of that creative process.
Yes. And for me, no matter what's going on, there is nothing like strapping on that apron and just getting in the zone. It doesn't get any better than that. So what advice would you give people starting out? What did you wish you knew when you first started painting or creating?
I would say for most people, and I taught a lot actually, and I taught like art to people who said, the A word was like, no, don't, I taught people to draw a human face in the first half hour. I had everybody freehand follow my little exercise and draw a freehand face, because it's intimidating to people, especially I was dealing with people who were coming from a fabric, a textile, a quilt world into the art quilt world. And that involved, making imagery. So what I saw so much, and for beginning people especially, is be easier on yourself. It is a crippling thing to be so hard on yourself. When you are starting out, for me, drawing came naturally. I was extremely lucky that way. I could draw from a very young age. It just, there's, in a classroom of little kids, you'll see a couple that have that natural tendency. But the others will look at it and say, oh, I can't make a teapot that looks like a teapot, so I can't draw. And they label themselves very early. And it was painful to me, as one who could, to see other people putting down their pencil forever. And then I'd get them as adults, and they would bemoan that moment that they saw in their past. So I would say, if you are starting on a creative path, go for it and be easy on yourself. Self-criticism is crippling, Just try to say, here, and everybody is doing their personal best, whatever level that may be on the creative path. Very powerful to keep reminding yourself, I am getting better and better. I'm working at it. Just don't give up and be a little easier on yourself. Do an exercise, throw it away if you hate it. But it's actually really, I had people save their work efforts and do it again, and look at how much this time you got this just so fabulous here. This worked here. You can learn from your mistakes, of course. We all know that. So just keep going, I'd say.
That's great advice. Definitely people need to hear that. I know I needed to hear that. I struggled early on in my music efforts, and if I had let the criticism back then get to me, I'd not be doing it now. So yes, so important. I actually had a teacher tell me that I should, now that I think about it, that I should never paint a landscape, that I should stick to portraits, and I had no business painting landscapes. And you know what? And at first, and the person was the publisher of a national art magazine, so I really took it to heart. But I wanted to paint some landscape. I mean, I didn't want to limit myself as far as what I was painting. So I did, but I always felt that little nudge. Well, the interesting thing is I've sold more landscapes than anything else. So paint what you love. Just keep going. And I wasn't as good with them. The portraits came more naturally to me. So it's a really good point that if you're not good at something right away, or you're judging yourself, you know what? Just keep going. Just time
Absolutely.
under the brush. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what's next for you? Where do you see yourself going, or what's on the horizon?
Well, I have a bunch of big canvases. Not big for you, Shannon, who I know you work big, but up to now, I think my largest is like 20 by 24. And I have some like bigger than that. And I know they're harder to sell, but I'm going to give myself the gift this year of doing some larger paintings. I love mythology and I love figurative stuff. And I'm thinking of maybe a series of mythological, especially women and myth. And I have done some versions of things that I might like to revisit. Remember that spiral thing? I really have come back to some concepts that still interest me. I think maybe I still have something to say about that, you know. So I'm thinking maybe I'll just play and work bigger and do that for the joy of it, you know. That's my thought.
That sounds great. So if people want more information about you and your art, where can they go?
Well, I have an all-new website. It's www.lura-art.com. And also on IG, I am lura.artist. And on Facebook, I'm Laura Schwarz-Smith and Laura Schwarz-Smith Art. I have, 2 pages there. And my work is shown in person, ongoing up at Yosemite Gateway Art Center. And right now I have work over at the 480 Lighthouse, huge 10,000 square foot gallery over in Pacific Grove. That's a treat to walk in and you can click likes on things. They have these little counters. So that's very cool. I just delivered one over there. And the exciting upcoming news is that our own Yosemite Gateway Gallery is having its own brand new gallery right in Oakhurst. So we're going to be so happy to have another gallery in our little town here. So if you'd like to go to my website, I would love if you would like to sign up for my occasional newsletters and any new art alerts. And thank you.
Well, it sounds good. You've truly been an inspiration. Thanks for being here, Laura.
Thank you, Shannon. It's been really fun.
And thank you all for joining us. Please visit our website, painterlylife.com, and all the places that you can get podcasts, like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap.